Well, I have been meditating on a passage in the Bible that I want to bring us together into the birth of Jesus for the next 3 weeks. And I believe God has given me an assignment for us as a church that I hope you will embrace. And I'm excited to share it with you. But first, we'll read the story. One of my favorite parts of the story of the birth of Jesus concerns some people who came to visit him and worship him from another country, from the East. And that is, of course, after the birth of Jesus. But they brought some gifts. And I think those gifts are prophetic, and they're also picturing who Jesus is. So I just want to look at that part of the Christmas story for the next 3 weeks and look at the 3 gifts they brought and what we can learn from those 3 gifts. Is that good? So the story is found in Matthew chapter 2, and we'll read that. Thank you. Anyone? Okay. We're just going to read this story, and then we'll go back. Here's how the story goes. Okay. Matthew chapter 2. Okay. Here's how the story goes. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense, or some versions will say frankincense, and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another means. Okay, so let's talk about who these Magi are, first of all. We know they're from the East. And the Magi were people who were the scholars of their day. They were the ones who studied things to get wisdom. And they were experts in 2 particular areas. They were expert in dream interpretation, and they were experts in reading the stars to discern what was going on by studying the stars. They were astrologers. And what's so interesting about these Magi, of course, is that there's a long tradition of Magi, and we can read about them in the Bible in the time of Daniel in the Persian Empire, where Daniel became a Magi after he had been captive and brought into Babylon. And he became one of the greatest Magi, maybe the greatest Magi of all time, because he was the greatest dream interpreter. And he was someone who God used greatly. I mean, he was famous among the Magi because he had saved all the Magi from dying as a result of being able to interpret the dream of the king. Welcome, welcome. Hello, welcome. So the Magi would have known about Daniel. Daniel, I mean, there's so many stories in the book of Daniel that made him famous, but one of the things that Daniel did was he predicted the coming of Christ with such specificity. He gave them a prophecy of exactly when Christ would come. I think it's probably, to me, the greatest prophecy in the Bible regarding the coming of Christ. If you want to read it, it's found in Daniel chapter 9. But what's interesting about this, and by the way, the song Ancient of Days, comes out of the book of Daniel, where Daniel was looking ahead to the kingdom that was not made by men, that would be an eternal kingdom. And Daniel was saying that 483 years would be the time when the Messiah would come. And from the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, or from the rebuilding. So Daniel was very specific, 700 years before Christ, that Daniel would give this prediction. And it's very powerful because Daniel, in his prediction, saw the King of Kings. Because Daniel saw visions of coming kingdoms, but they were earthly kingdoms that would come with great specificity. In fact, my own coming to know Jesus Christ and to be a Christian, a follower of Jesus, came as a result of studying the book of Daniel. When I became interested, and someone said to me, I wasn't sure about God at all. And I was asking about the purpose of life. And one of my friends said, well, if you want to know the purpose of life, you should read the Bible, because the answer is in there. And my response was, you got to be kidding. No way. I had rejected the idea of the Bible being a book that could lead me to God. But he challenged me. He said, have you ever read the Bible? I said, no. He said, how can you reject it? You said you're looking for an answer. I told you where the answer is. Why don't you find it? So I said, okay. And the very first Bible study I went to was in the book of Daniel. And it was chapter 4. I remember so distinctly that as we studied that chapter, and I could see the specificity with the 4 coming kingdoms that Daniel predicted. At the end of my first Bible study, I said, there must be a God. How else could this information be given to Daniel except someone who knows history? That's amazing to me. So that was the thing that captured me. But, Daniel, it's very important to see these guys now are waiting years and years and years. They know the time frame, but they're looking for a sign to know when this prophecy would be fulfilled, when they could know that this king that Daniel predicted would come. And so what are they doing? They're studying the stars. They're looking to see, is there going to be any sign in the stars? And for those who study astronomy and know that in BC, 3 BC, that something amazing astronomically happened in the heavens that had not been seen for so long. I don't know if it happened before, but in the star movements, the planet Jupiter began to move from the east to the west. And the planet Jupiter is called the king planet because it's the largest planet. And there was another star that accompanied Jupiter, so that as they passed one another, it would have lit up the sky in an unusual way. And that star was Romulus. And that star is called the king star. So the king star was going past the king planet, and with the retrograde movement, it would be doing a circle around the planet to the eye. And this is what's happening moving east. And then at a certain point, it was appearing, if you looked up at it, in the constellation called Leo. Now, if they had been familiar with Daniel, what had taught them, that Leo was the constellation associated with Israel, because it's called the lion. Leo is the lion. And the symbol, one of the symbols for Israel was the lion. And then at the foot, in the constellation at that point, would have been Virgo. And Virgo is the virgin. And the virgin is appearing in the lion with the king planet in the king's star, and all of this is taking place. And they must have said, this is it. This is what we were waiting for. And God is showing it to us in the stars. Oh, God is so gracious that he reveals to people what they need from their background to come to know Jesus, to come to worship Jesus. And so what we have to realize is when we read this story about the Magi, that there was a lot of preparation. They didn't just show up, but Daniel had prepared the way. And God had put signs in the heavens for them. They came because God had prepared their hearts. And brothers and sisters, every one of us, if we look in our own lives, we should know that God has prepared our hearts to follow Jesus. Now, if you've already come to Jesus, you should see how he prepared you, what he put into your life. Now, in my life, he prepared me through the death of my father to ask questions about the purpose of life. It was part of my preparation. The part of my preparation was that person who listened to my question and said, oh, you want an answer? It's in the Bible. And I've seen so many people who, if they are sensitive and open to what God is doing, they will see how God is preparing them. You know, I remember meeting a student from China who was so eager to come to the Bible study. And she became a follower of Christ very shortly after coming to the United States. I said, okay, this is unusual. What happened? How did you get this heart to want to know God? And she said, you know, when I was in China, I tried to come and study in the United States, and my visa was rejected 3 times. And I have a grandmother who was a Christian that I didn't, know very well. And that grandmother told me, there's a God in heaven that you can pray to. And I'm going to pray for you, and I want you to pray that God will grant you the visa the next time you apply. She said, well, what's going to be different the 4th time? The only thing that was different the 4th time was the prayer of her grandmother and her own prayer. And when she got the visa and came to the United States, she said, okay, I got to find out who God is. And God prepared her way through an answered prayer. I think about my friend Christy Wilson, who had a great heart for the Afghan people. And years ago, you couldn't get into Afghanistan. He wanted the Afghans to know about Jesus. And so many, many years ago, he found out that there was a delegation of Afghan athletes that were going to compete in the Olympics in London. And so he decided that what he was going to do was make gifts for them. And what he did is he had a special number of Bibles made that on the front of the Bible had the Olympic rings on them. And they were in the Afghan language. And so he found, in those days, this was before security concerns, he went into the Olympic Village and found the Afghan athletes and presented them with these gifts of a Bible. And, that was what he did. Many, many years later, he finally got to go to Afghanistan to help them in terms of their agricultural and to improve their country, also wanting to share Jesus with the Afghan people. And one day, an Afghan said, could I make an appointment to see you? And he said, yes. Hello, welcome. And when the Afghan said to him, sir, I have some questions about a book I have been reading, and I was hoping you could help me. And he pulled out of his pocket one of these Bibles that had the Olympic seals on it. And I mean, we're talking about, there was 12, I think there was like 12 athletes. There was only 12 Bibles. And one of those Bibles had made it back to Afghanistan and had found its way into this person. This wasn't one of the athletes. And that person had found the man who had gave the Bibles and asked him the questions. I mean, God has a way of preparing the hearts of people. And he had prepared the hearts of these Magi. And you all can be part of the process of preparing the way of the Lord, preparing the way for Jesus when you do your good works and when you share, when you have opportunity, and when you're sensitive to the Holy Spirit. Sometimes it's with words and sometimes it's with actions. Mohit knows this story, but I love the story of my friend Takashi from Japan, who, there was this Japanese woman who used to walk in front of my house and her English was so poor. She was studying English. We couldn't communicate with one another, but I was friendly to her. And I invited her to go to a Christmas conference after her first semester studying English. Her English still wasn't very good. And we went to this conference. At the end of the conference, she said, I want to follow Jesus. I thought maybe she misunderstood. You know, I thought maybe she didn't get the English right, you know, because she had filled out this form. And I said, how's the way? It says here you want to follow Jesus. Is that correct? She said, yes. I said, how can you, like, why? And she said, because if you are, she didn't use these words, but basically she said, if you're representing your God, you have done a good job. And I want to follow that God. Wow, that was very powerful. But okay, that's not the end of the story. So Kazue asked me to help her move one day. We had a van, and she asked some of her friends to help her. And one of the guys she asked to help her was a guy named Takashi. And Takashi sat down in the front seat next to me in the van. We loaded up the van, and I said, hi, what's your name? He said, I'm Takashi. I said, I'm Rich. He said, I know who you are, and I know what you do, and I'm not interested. And I said, wow, okay. Yes, he heard something, you know. And I used to have the Bible study in my home, and different people came, and including this one guy named Manoj from India. And Manoj, you know, he was a Hindu background person, but he was coming to the Bible study. And then one day Takashi showed up. I'm like, Takashi, what are you doing here? I'm so glad to see you. He said, I got to find out what's going on here. I said, what do you mean? He said, first Kazue and now Manoj. I said, what do you mean? He said, Manoj is my roommate. He keeps coming back and telling me what he's learning here in the Bible study. And I got to find out what's going on with these people. And Takashi became a Christian in my kitchen, praying together with my brother Paul Ishihara. So, you know, what I'm just emphasizing, God prepared these Magi, and he's preparing everybody to receive the good news, whether their hearts are hard, whether they have no knowledge about God. It is God's desire and will that everyone know him. And in every culture of the world, he has made a revelation of himself. There's, in cultures of the world, some evidence of God. Now, it may be hidden, it may be buried, it may be covered up, but it's there. And in the heart, eternity has been set in the hearts of people. There is a longing in each of our hearts to know God, even if we say there is no God. So be encouraged by this story of the Magi coming to Christ, that you don't discount anybody. You don't look at anybody and say, they're too far away from God. And they're in a culture that doesn't know God. Don't look at people like that. God is working in the hearts of everybody. And it's so encouraging to see these Magi waiting. They've been waiting for a long time to see this fulfillment of this king that has been promised by Daniel. And they come searching for that king. And they're searching for a king. They're not searching just for anybody. They say, where is the king? They recognize the signs in the heaven and recognized what had been told by Daniel of this eternal coming kingdom that would have a king. Wow, I am just so blessed by these Magi, that they took a long journey. This was not a short journey. Now, let me talk about the gifts of the Magi. You with me so far? Okay. Now, they brought these three gifts: gold, incense, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, how many of you are planning to give a gift to somebody at Christmas? Is it most of you? Okay. So, no gift. Did you raise your hand? You did. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. You took it down before I could look. Okay. All right. Now, I know some people have stopped giving gifts because of the commercialism associated with it. And some people have stopped giving gifts because they don't need anything, and they tell people, I don't want any gifts. But still, it looks like some of you who have grandchildren and some, kids make lists of things they want for Christmas. It is one of the, what's that?
When she showed up.
Oh, good. You're already prepared. You prepared the gift. You hoped she was going to be here.
Yes. The state of Ohio motto of potholder.
Yeah.
It doesn't weigh anything. It's flat. It can go in your suitcase and it won't set off.
Okay.
Alarm.
Now, this is an example of how to think ahead of time about what gift to give to someone.
Oh.
She's realizing that this woman from China is going back to China. She's going to have a suitcase. She can only fit so much in the suitcase. So she wants to get her a gift that is light.
Oh, but light too, because it's the state motto of Ohio.
Yes.
With God,
All things
are possible. Made in China, they can't.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, some people have a gift of giving in a way that they pay attention to what are the needs and what are the desires of people, and they can give the best gifts. I still remember this lady in my life who, when she had the gift of giving, and when she got me a gift, I thought, how did she know? How did you know to get me that gift? And I can't remember, like maybe it was like a coffee, what do you call it? Coffee maker. And she said, yeah, I knew your coffee maker was broken. And so she had paid attention to that. And so she knew that she wanted to get something that was practical. And people, sometimes people with that gift of giving, they know exactly, they pay attention to what you need. So these guys, these Magi, they were not doing last minute Amazon shopping. They were not on December 24th going to the store and trying to find out what was left on the shelf and just get some. You know, they prepared very carefully the gifts that they were going to bring. And the first gift is gold. And what we realize is they were going to visit a king. And the metal that is most associated with kings is gold. Kings typically would have a gold crown that they would wear. And they often would have gold things that would be on there. But at least, I don't know if maybe in China, jade is more than gold. Is that right? Yeah. But Jesus, what, not necessarily?
Jade is popular, but gold is still more expensive.
But I think the emperor was buried in jade in the tomb. No? Some of them. Yes, but how about for the emperor? Was it gold for the emperor or jade for the emperor more important?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
But they wear the color yellow.
Yes.
That's the only emperor can wear.
And is that associated with gold, you think?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. How about in India? Gold is really big.
Yeah.
For a king, right?
Jewelries and yeah.
But the king was supposed to have gold, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So this is kind of a more universal. How about in Nigeria? King's gold?
Women like good.
Women like it. But how about the king?
King. King.
Well,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so it seems like it's pretty broad, this association with royalty and kingship and gold. And so, so very clearly that one of the first gifts, this first gift that they were giving, was in line with who Jesus was, and they wanted to honor Jesus in their worship of him by recognizing him as the king by bringing gold. And this is such a beautiful thing to see, that when they came to worship, they didn't just come and say, I'm going to bow down to Jesus and say, oh, you're the king. No, they brought something to the king. They brought gold. And I think this is a beautiful gift. You know, did Jesus need any gold then? I wonder, did they like make a little necklace of gold and put it around Jesus? This actually was a very practical gift, because shortly after they gave this gift, they had to go to Egypt because they were fleeing for their lives. And what money did they have? What could they bring? They could bring this gold, and they could survive off of this gold. So they were also preparing something for Jesus that now, in some sense, right, God doesn't need anything. But when Jesus was on the earth, he needed food, he needed drink, I mean, he became subject to the same laws and rules and regulations of a body that we have. And so he needed gold. He needed something to survive. And God provided that through these magi. It's so wonderful. So here's the thought that I have that comes out of this story is people who like to give gifts, especially at Christmas, they sometimes delight in finding the special gift. Like some people really get into it. Some people don't like gift giving at all. Like, just tell me what to get you. I don't want to like surprise you with anything. And some people like to just give practical gifts. It's like the person who gave the Christmas card and said to his wife, you know, I'm not getting you a gift this year because you still haven't used the gift I gave you last year, which was a snow shovel. You know, so, a very insensitive guy. I mean, but I think that other people delight in giving a gift that isn't necessarily practical, but is just extravagant. When the woman poured the perfume on Jesus, I wouldn't say that was a practical gift. It was an extravagant gift because it came out of devotion and love. By the way, you know, for those of you who are familiar with Western literature, one of the classics of Western literature is the story of The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. How many of you don't know that story? Okay, so I'll quickly tell you that there's a woman whose greatest thing she loves the most is her hair. She likes to take it. It's very long hair, beautiful hair. She's always combing her hair, and the husband is very poor. They're very poor. They don't have any money. And the greatest treasure of the husband is a watch that he has to take in and out of his pocket. Now, at those times, people could put their watch on a chain instead of putting it in their pocket. And so the guy thinks, okay, I don't have any money to get something for my wife, so I'm going to sell my watch and buy her some beautiful combs or to put in her hair. And I will be so happy to see my wife happy and for her hair to be celebrated in that way. And the wife, on the other hand, is thinking, what could I get my husband? And she thinks about a gold chain, but she has no money. So what she decides to do is cut her hair off and sell it. So on the day that they come to present their gifts to one another, she opens up the things for her hair, but her hair is cut off. And he gets the chain and he says, I have no watch. But they got the greatest gift of love, even though they didn't get the material thing. So here's the thought I have for us as a church. Maybe you already do this, but you know, usually Christmas is associated with giving to people. But I think it'd be great if every family prayerfully considers what gift can you give to Jesus this year. Now, in some way, one of the answers in one of the hymns is just give your heart to Jesus. That's the greatest gift you can give him. Give him your life in a way that you say, here I am. And certainly the worship of a king, that the response to Jesus being king is to give your life to him, to submit in a not a forced way, but in a willing way to say, Lord, I want to give my life to you. That is a gift. And God does not despise that gift. He loves that gift when we come and give ourselves to him. But I would like to suggest that let us give a gift specifically to Jesus this year. If you're going to give gifts to people, why not prepare a gift for Jesus? Now, some people, the way they give their gift to Jesus is they do give financial gifts to missions and charities and workers of the gospel, that they say, let me give an extra gift or a special gift because this is the way I'm giving to Jesus. And there's a lot of the end of the year gifts that people give in that way. But there's many other ways that we could give a gift to Jesus. It could be a gift of service where you take some time and you serve those who are in need in some special way. But how many of you have already planned to give a gift to Jesus this Christmas? Have you have a plan for that yet?
Giving to
You have You're going to be giving to missions. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the rest of you on your Christmas list, if you have one, and you're thinking about what gifts you're going to prepare this year, you didn't necessarily put Jesus on the list. Should. Okay. So this is what I would like to do. I would like to ask you to pray. Now, remember, God doesn't need anything. Now, sometimes people insist on giving a gift even when you don't need anything, because they just want to show their love and devotion to you. You know, it's still a beautiful thing. Like my wife asked me, Rich, what can I get you? I say, nothing. I don't need anything. I have everything I need. She said, you know, there's still a desire to give something. God needs nothing, but it's a beautiful thing when in devotion to God, we still give a gift. So I really like to, and what we're going to do is for our Christmas Eve service, not with your name on it, but I'm going to collect the gifts that were given to Jesus written down and just be grateful to have an offering of worship to God in that way. Would you participate with me in that? I'm also doing this. And it was one of the things that I was struck by this story of, the Magi were the first ones to give gifts, but they gave the gifts to Jesus. They didn't give them to one another. The Magi didn't say, hey, it's Jesus here, let me give you a gift. They gave the gifts to Jesus. I mean, gift giving is a beautiful thing. It comes from this story. But I would like us to go back to this story in our gift giving. So it could be a special financial gift. It could be a very personal thing. You know, in the story of the Good Samaritan, or actually in the story of the rich young ruler, when Jesus tells the rich young ruler, go and sell everything you have and give it to the poor. I think he wasn't going to give it to a charity. I think he wanted the rich young ruler to be personally involved with the poor in giving to them. And I think it may be that your gift, let's say you have no money and you say, what can I give? Maybe you could cook a meal and give it to someone. Maybe you could deliver the meal. Now that's easy for you. That's hard for some of us. That might be the great gift of love from you. That is your love. I know when you cook, it is love coming out in your food. That's what makes your food so delicious, is it's cooked with love. Whenever food is cooked with love, it always tastes better to me. Because it's when I know, like I'll tell you, when I think about one of the greatest meals I ever ate was in China. And it was in a little hut with a dirt floor and no furniture, in a village of leprosy affected people, whose arm was affected by leprosy in a way that she couldn't use that left arm very well. But she wanted to cook me a meal. She insisted on cooking me a meal. And she brought, it took her some time with her right arm to cook that meal and then serve it. It was I don't think it was a very healthy meal, but it was a beautiful meal. And I received that meal. I felt so loved, and one of my best meals ever. So maybe that's what you could do, is cook a meal and deliver it to someone who might not otherwise have a good meal. Why don't we, do you believe that God speaks, that if we listen, if we ask the Lord, what could I do for you this Christmas? What gift could I give you? And if Jesus says, there's nothing I need. Okay, that's true. I think he can prompt you with an act of love. So why don't we go before the Lord and listen? This is our assignment together. I can't force it on you, but I think I believe this is the message that Jesus wanted to give me to give to you, so that we would all participate in together. And like I say, have our worship on December 24th as part of our giving gifts to Jesus. How's that sound to you? It's good? Yeah. I mean, the kids could participate in this, right? Yeah. Any question about this?
So 24th is this.
Yeah, we're going to, and by the way, I almost forgot, I discovered, I told you we're going to have a gathering on Christmas Eve. This was on a Sunday. My granddaughter, Marie, was born on December 24th. She's named after Mary in the story because she was born on December 24th. But we're going to have a party for her. And so in order to have the time necessary for, we're going to move up the time to 3. I hope that doesn't make it impossible for you to come, but we're going to do 3 o'clock for our Christmas Eve service, okay? For 1 hour, okay? And then we're just going to have some desserts. We're not eating a meal together on that day, but I hope you can still come and celebrate together. Okay. That's going to be a Sunday. Sunday is the 24th. Yeah, Christmas is Monday. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have a question about these Magi or about the gift? Yes. I am the next 2 weeks. The next 2 weeks. Now, I'll say just a little bit, just a brief moment more about this gold. Since gold is for a king, and we recognize, oops, sorry, someone is calling me on WhatsApp. So one of the things about Jesus as being a king, we sang about it, he is of a different quality of king than an earthly king. He's a king who was born in poverty. He was a king who came to serve. He's a king who came with none of the outward wrappings or privileges that most kings have. He was a king with impeccable character who was willing to identify and be part of common people. And one of the other aspects of the king that I really appreciate is found in Isaiah 9, which talks about Jesus. It's one of the prophecies of Isaiah, which says, "For unto us a child is born, and unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders." So that is the kingship, that is the rulership. The government will be upon his shoulders. But when it is a picture of being upon someone's shoulders, it means that they are bearing the weight of responsibility that goes with rulership. And what we recognize is the statement just connected to the government will be upon his shoulders, and he will be called Counselor. And I find that what our king has desiring to do in his rulership over all things is to bear our burdens and to take our griefs upon him. Of course, that moves into his role as a savior. But our king is not the domineering, beating king. He's not the Pharaoh of this world. He's not the king who wants to suppress us. He's the king that wants to bring us into a life-giving relationship with him. He wants to give us full access to him, where the kings of this earth, you may never be able to see their face. But King Jesus wants you to see his face. The kings of this world, they don't want to share their power with you. King Jesus is the one who wants us to participate in his power. And so it's so wonderful to know King Jesus. And this story of the gold coming to King Jesus, recognize he is a different king. He's the King of Kings, and he is the greatest king of all. And we could, go through this. He was a different type of king than people expected, because people expected a conquering king. This whole discussion that Pilate had with Jesus, are you a king? Yes, I'm a king. Well, if you're a king, then why don't your followers fight for you? And why don't, how come you're like in this condition? And Jesus said, well, my kingdom is not of this world. I didn't come to set up a kingdom that would be ruled by force. And so it's a beautiful thing. That's the king we all long for. The king of justice, the king of perfect righteousness, the king who is loving, the king who stoops from his throne and comes and lives among us. Oh, what a wonderful king King Jesus is. I should have played the little, maybe you've heard that little poem, That's My King. It's a famous poem. I should have played that one today, but it goes through all of the beautiful attributes of Jesus, and he says, that's my king. Indescribable. Okay, I am going to stop here today. Any comment, any feedback, anything from I talked about that you're resonating with you? Any thoughts? Anything you think I missed that you want to add? Is it all setting good with you? I've made a lot of notes, but I didn't look at my notes.
I don't heard anybody else talking and have a question.
Maybe you will be the water in the pump that lubricates it.
Okay.
Okay.
Does God sometimes answer you before you ask? Because asking before you finish asking, I realized that God had answered. So, but is that, anybody got the experience that even before you got it out of your mouth?
Now the scripture says that. There is a scripture that says that while we are yet speaking, that God will answer. And so God is able to show himself like that so strongly. But, one of the messages that I don't have time to give is about, now, by the way, we don't know how many magi there were. Typically in a manger scene, you will see 3. And some people have named them, but we don't know how many there were. There could have been more than 3, but they gave 3 gifts. But many people say 3 magi. We could talk about the 3 wise women in the story of Jesus. And I would have loved to have given that message, the 3 wise women of the Christmas story. And one of those wise women was Elizabeth. And by the way, how do you know someone is wise? You know someone is wise by the decisions they make. That shows their wisdom. and Elizabeth was one of those women who was wise, because even when God did not answer her prayer for a long time, she didn't become bitter. And that showed the decision not to become bitter, but to continue to pray to God, which is what happened, and wait on God's timing in her life, was a beautiful part of the story. In fact, the 3 women in the story of Jesus, one is widowed, one is married, and one is single. So it's great how God included the 3 women in different stages in the Christmas story, so that all the women could know that Jesus incorporates you into his story. And I'm starting to give that message. I'm supposed to stick with the 3 guys today. Or not the 3, the Magi. Yes.
Were the Magi of Jewish background, or were they not?
From Persia or?
They were from Persia. They were probably Zoroastrians. They were not of Jewish background, but they became worshipers of Jesus, which is, again, a beautiful way that we see in the story of Jesus that all the nations are being incorporated. And no matter what your religious background is, that Jesus wants you to be able to come to him. And I love that about the story of Christmas, is it wasn't just the Jews. Even though they said the king of the Jews, they saw that king was still for them, which is interesting because Jesus is not a tribal God. He's not for a certain group of people. He's for everybody. But he was born in the Jews. So they recognize that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Any other question? You usually have a question. What question today? Oh, you're so overwhelmed.
No, I think I have had enough.
That's great. That's when a good meal is served and you had enough and you don't need a dessert. That's great. Wow. Beautiful. Yes.
With the story of the Magi, talking about who the Magi are,
Yes.
Russia and all that,
Yes.
and these are days worshiping God. And normally we would have looked at them, without the story of them coming to Jesus,
Yes.
we would have looked at them as pagans, probably,
As pagans?
as pagans,
Yes. Yes.
or as like people Paul was talking to that to be unknown for them.
Yes.
Like I'm trying to see how people like that, who they don't have the opportunity to come and worship Christ,
Yes.
how are we going to place them in terms of Christian faith?
Okay. We talk about people living up to the light of truth that they have received. And they had only so much that they had gotten to know about God through Daniel. Daniel had revealed who God was. And that much they took hold of it. And the fact is, they were true seekers that when they saw the stars and the signs in the stars, and they said, we're going to pursue this. And the fact that it says they came and they worshiped, that when they found Jesus and they realized what Daniel told us was true. And the fact is that this shows that there's a God that we want to worship. I think they came to that place where they saw a fulfillment that was within their own background. And I think that's a beautiful thing when Jesus fulfills the longing and desires of our background. So I do believe at this point, they became worshipers of Jesus in a way that I don't know, they probably had to sort things out when they went back, right? Because when they went back to the other Magi, like, what are they going to tell them? They're going to tell them about King Jesus. So I think this is kind of like a conversion here, a transfer of allegiance. I don't know if they let go of everything in their background. I don't know how they went back to interpreting the stars as guidance, or they went back to now praying to God. You know, it's interesting. They got a dream. You know, I talked about they were experts in dreams. Did you read the reason they didn't go back to their country is because God gave them a dream. So it's amazing how God spoke to them through the means that they could hear, through the stars and through the dreams. And that shows me that God is able to go beyond cultural limitations to communicate to people, but they have to have open hearts. And these guys, they paid a price to go and worship Jesus. That's why I think in terms of us and our worship, let's not give cheap worship to Jesus. And remember David said, I won't sacrifice to the Lord that which costs me nothing. And so as we're thinking about this aspect of a gift, let it cost us something. I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I do think that these were true worshipers of God, even though they might have a mixture in their background. Yes. Why? It says they worship God. Ah, okay. Yes. 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 Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, shall we end here? This is so good. So